What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to be breaking down the best settings you need to be using in Apex Legends, from gameplay settings to sensitivity, and if advanced look controls or ALC is worth using. I've got my recommendations based off what a lot of pro players use and my personal experience, as I've done a ton of these videos in the past, but it has been a while since my last one, and we do have quite a few changes. This also includes for the first time both my console and PC settings. This will be the most in-depth I have ever gone with settings, so let's get to it. All right, we're just going to kick it off with the gameplay tab. For interact prom style, I have default. You could do compact. Basically, this just has less stuff on screen for you to see. I like having the default. I like the classic look, so I do leave it as this. Button hints, I leave as on. Basically, you can see what buttons you are pressing on the bottom of your screen there, whether you're mouse and key or if you are a controller. Crosshair damage feedback, I leave this as off because I think damage numbers as stacking just gives me all the feedback I need. I don't need to see the X in the center of my screen to be letting me know that I'm hitting my shots. The only reason you may want to have this as on or X with shield icon, personally, I would probably do, is because if you are a caustic or if you are a Watson player and you're not looking at your fences, you will get an additional level of indication that someone did just cross your fence or went into your gas. You don't really need this because you are going to have audio cues and other things to let you know that this did happen, but this is something that you should know. Ping opacity, I like to leave this as default. For some reason, when I have it as faded, I just can't see it sometimes. Maybe I'm getting old and blind. If you want less stuff on your screen, you can have it as faded, but I do default. Obituaries, you're going to want this as on. This is your kill feed in the upper right hand corner. Minimap rotation, this will kind of be your personal preference. I leave it as off because I always like having the north side of my map be up on my screen. I don't want it to be rotating around. I just find it a little bit harder for me to like direct myself and understand where I am. Weapon auto cycle on empty, I have this as on. I did have this as off for a long time, so this is a new one. Basically, when you run out of ammo, it's just gonna auto swap for you and you can just continue to shoot. Having this as on will just let you do it as fast as possible, whereas before, if you had it off, you manually gotta switch weapons, which will slow you down a little bit. Always sprint, I have this as on. For controller players, this will help save that left stick if you are sprinting, so I leave this as on. Auto run, I have as off. I wanna be in control when I am sprinting. Jetpack control, I have as hold. If you're not having paddles, I would recommend probably toggle so you can fly around a little bit easier, but honestly, I think hold is way more natural. Incoming damage feedback, you'll want this to be 3D. This is just gonna give you the most intel as you can where you are getting shot from. Taking damage closest death box or crafting menu, this is a huge one. Always is a big one. You gotta have this as off. When you're going in for an armor swap, if you're getting shot, you're gonna get ripped out of it. If this is on and you don't want this, you wanna be able to stay in the death box and get that armor swap. Off-screen portraits, this is basically just telling you where your teammates are on the side of the screen. I leave this as on. If you want less stuff on your screen, you can't have this off. Personally, I like to know where my teammates are a little bit quicker, and this is gonna help with that. Hop up, pop up, I have this as off. If you have it as on, you're just gonna get a little thing to hop up in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. You don't really need that. I find it not necessary because honestly, there's not that many hop-ups these days, so you just don't need it. I have this as off. Both streamer mode and anonymous mode, I have as off and disabled. I just don't need this. I'm not a huge streamer. I don't really care who sees that I am in their lobby. Usage sharing, I have this as enabled. If you don't want to send data to EA, you can put this as disabled. I don't really care. You know, this will be up to you and your personal preference. Performance display, sometimes I have this as off, sometimes I have this as on. I had this on when I'm on PC just so I can monitor my frame rate. When I'm on console, it's less of a big deal, so I do turn it off. Plus, when I'm recording on console, I want the screen to be as clean as possible. I just don't want more stuff on the screen cluttering up what I am presenting to my audience. Communication filter, I have as everybody. Basically, this means I can get text from everyone that is in the game. If you don't want to see any text on your screen, you can do nobody. If you only want your friends or your squad mates, you can do friends. I just do everybody. Reticle and laser sights, I'm doing the same. I have this nice 12, 255, 12. It's this nice like green. I find this works really well on all the maps. I've never had an issue telling where I'm aiming or telling that the laser sight is, you know, I can't really see. So I do think this is one of the best colors you can use in the game. Definitely recommend you try this out. Colorblind mode and all these accessibility settings, I pretty much have as off or normal. I don't need to use any of them. This will be based off your personal needs. So I have this as all is off. But again, it will depend on you. Some people do use tritanopia because it does make some stuff a little bit easier on the eyes. Mouse and keyboard, I am not a mouse and keyboard player, so I'm not really gonna go into this too much. I will say, jump you may wanna have bound to scroll wheel. I know a lot of people do this. When I do dabble in mouse and keyboard, I have this as well. Otherwise, I pretty much leave everything else as default. Before I do the controller settings, let's do the video and audio because these are gonna be pretty in-depth for at least PC users out there. Audio, it's pretty straightforward. You know, this will depend on your PC and your settings. Advanced with the actual volumes. I want the sound effects to be maxed 100%. This is gonna give me all those gun sounds and those lack of footsteps, if you know what I mean. Dialogue volume, I do 20%. I don't want the in-game character to be speaking so much that I can't hear what is happening around me. And same thing with music and lobby music. music, I leave this around 10 to 15%. I do push to talk as well because honestly, I don't want open mic, and I would encourage everyone on PC to use push to talk so you cannot just blast people's ears nonstop. Video, this is going to depend on your PC specific settings. There is a couple big ones I will go over though. For starters, I do 1440p. Brightness, I have a little bit past half. You'll probably want to keep your brightness up a little bit. If it's too low, stuff could get a little dark. You might not see certain things in certain areas. Honestly, 60% is a little bit low. There has been times where I am having a hard time seeing people. Field of view, you want this to really be over 90, higher the better. However, if you do have it super high, you're going to be zoomed out. The enemies in the center of your screen are just going to be smaller. It's just how it works. So keep that in mind. I do 104. This is just something I've done for years and years now. Field of view, ability scaling, this is enabled by default. Absolutely think you should disable this. Basically, when you're simming with like an octane stim, your screen will kind of get zoomed out to show you like moving faster. I don't want this. I want it to be super consistent no matter what ability I'm using. If I'm sprinting and whatnot, I want this as disabled. Sprint view shake, minimal as well. I don't want my screen shaking like more. It's just gonna make it harder for me to see things. As for the video settings, this will depend on your PC and your specific performance that you are trying to achieve. I have an RTX 4090, so I can pretty much have everything maxed. For me as well, I am posting videos on YouTube. I want everything to look as good and pretty as possible, so I leave everything max. If you are trying to like become pro or just sweat it out really, you could lower some of these. If you want to enhance your performance, the big ones are going to be textures. Lower these down to like 2 or 4 gigabytes. This will give you a huge performance boost right off the rip without really doing much. Same thing with texture filtering. Lower this down. This will help a ton. Otherwise, you could lower the sun and spot shadow details. This is pretty heavy on your resources. And really everything down here like model, map, effects, impact, ragdolls, I wouldn't worry about this as much. You could lower the effects details to medium. This might help you a little bit in terms of like seeing things that are happening, but for the most part, these aren't gonna really affect your performance. All right, for the controller settings, we have a lot to go over here. For starters, let's begin with the button layout. I do button puncher. Now, this is definitely something I will recommend for everyone to use. Basically, on default, I find that sometimes I click in that right stick and I'm accidentally meleeing. I don't want this. So I do button puncher. This just swaps the crouch and the melee. Another big advantage of this is I can crouch with the right stick and have complete aim while I am like crouch spamming or crouching in and out of fights. So this is pretty big. I'm also using a paddle controller. So I have jump bound to the back as well as crouch to my back 2 paddles. If you are not a paddle, an elite, or a pro controller user, 100% you need to be using evolved. This will give you full control and full movement over your character while also maintaining your complete aim, which is huge. You jump with the left bumper, it's a little weird. You crouch with the right stick, but once you get this down, it'll be like second nature to you. And this is absolutely incredible. I 100% recommend that you use evolved if you do not have a paddled controller. You of course can go into customize as well and try out different things, but personally, button puncher and evolved, it's really all you're gonna need. Stick layout, I do default. Interact reload, I want tap to use and tap to reload. I don't want to have the hold to reload or hold to use something. It just takes too long. Tap to use, tap to reload. If you're on a doorway, this is when it does become a little tricky. The game will try to like open the door instead of reloading. You can't just look away from the door and generally you will be able to reload. You can also empty your magazine and the gun will just start to reload as well. These are a couple little tips that you can use if you are struggling with both tap to use and tap to reload. Crouch button, I have this as hold. A lot of pro players use toggle. I do hold because I find that I can bunny hop way easier. So I do recommend that you use hold. If you are ratting, I find sometimes holding crouch can be a little troublesome. So you could come in here quickly and put toggle on if that does happen to you. Just a quick tip for you. Aim button, hold, survival slot on, adaptive triggers off. Trigger dead zones, this can kind of depend on your controller. I don't have any problems with my triggers. So as soon as I start pressing the trigger, you know, I want the gun to start shooting or start aiming down sights. I don't want to get down to a certain percentage of pulling that trigger in order for me just to aim down sights. It doesn't really make sense. Menu cursor speed, this is a huge one. It needs to be at least around half, I would say. Honestly, the faster you can get it, the better. This is going to affect your armor swapping speed. If it's too low, you're not going to be able to get to that armor swap really fast enough. So you really want this to be around half. You know, anything too high, you'll probably miss a lot. So half is generally where I do recommend you go for that. Movement and aiming, we will get to per optics and advanced look controls as well. I'm rocking a 4.4 classic. This will kind of depend on you. I'm a 30-plus-year-old gamer, so I have been playing shooters for a long time. So I like the classic feel. It's been what I've been playing my shooter games for 25 plus years. If you are trying to really get the most out of your Apex experience and get those higher ranks and really sweat it out, linear is pretty much what every single pro player plays on with the exception of a few. Basically, this just means whenever you move your stick, you're going 1-to-1. You are not having any sort of ramp up. You are going to get really bad stick drift like this on screen here. So just keep that in mind. You might want to go to a look dead zone of small. If you are running classic, I don't really think you need look dead zone. I like to have it as none. Look dead zone also depends on your controller. If you have an older controller, you probably need to have small. If you need to have large, honestly, it's probably time just to look at a new controller. Per optic settings, this is a massive one that I find a lot of people just overlook and don't tweak at all, which is a little weird to me. But basically, you want to have the less zoomed optics closer to the default setting because you don't really need to tweak them as much. But I find as you get to the upper scopes and the higher zooms, you need to increase them a little bit because you just cannot aim as fast when you are zoomed in a lot. So take a screenshot of this, pause the video, do whatever you gotta do. This is what I use. I honestly don't really even use 6, 8, or 10 times optics. So really it's just these top 4 that you need to be worried about. Before we get to the ALC, we got movement dead zone. I have this as small. This is your left stick if you are a controller player. If you're automatically moving without you hitting anything, you might need to do large. This one is not as big of a deal as look dead zone, so don't worry about that if your left stick is moving a little bit. Inverted look I have as off. Vibration I have as off. I think this is one that most people should consider doing. Yes, you're not going to get that feedback if you're getting shot and your controller's not shaking, but honestly, once you get used to it, you don't really need it. And by having vibration off, your hands aren't shaking, so I've always just felt like I have better control over my aim. I think it makes logical sense, you know? My hands aren't shaking. It's not going to add to the confusion or add to my aim. I don't need to worry about it. Advanced look controls. So I'm going to quickly break this down if you do want to use these, but right off the rip, I don't think these are necessary at all. There was a time in Apex's life cycle around year 2, year 3, where a lot of people were using these. I just do not think these are necessary anymore. Basically though, let's quickly go through it. Dead zone, you're going to want this to be as low as possible without you having stick drift. For me, it's usually around 8%. Outer threshold, I have this as 1%. Basically, if you have this as low, you can see the outer threshold going in. This means your movement and your aim is just going to be less varied. You're not going to be able to go as far before you hit the max threshold. So it's not really something that you want. Response curve, if you have it higher, this is more of a classic feel. If you have it closer to 1, this is going to be linear, so keep this in mind. I like the classic feel, so I keep it around 8. Per optic settings are again in here. I'm not going to go over those. You did just get them from me. Yaw speed and pitch speed. Yaw speed is left and right. Pitch is up and down. You do want to have your left and right higher than your up and down. The way you can think of it is basically your pitch speed. If you want to look straight up, it's only 90 degrees. If you want to turn around left and right and go all the way behind you, it's 180 degrees. So you need to be able to turn left and right faster than you would up and down. For yaw and pitch speed, I'm going to do something like 250 and like 200. This is closer to 4.4 classic, a little bit higher. It's nothing too fast, nothing too slow. If you want it faster, you can go up more. If you want it slower, you can go down. For turning extra yaw and turning ramp up time, basically, this is just going to be the longer you're holding left or right or up and down, it's going to start to ramp your speed up and you're going to start to move faster and faster and faster. I don't think you want any of these on. I think all of these should be absolutely 0. If you are not having a consistent look and feel where it's ramping up and you're just not really controlling it anymore, I don't think this is good. So having all these at 0, I think is the way to go. For ADS yaw speed and ADS pitch speed and all these down here, this is the same as above, except now it is your aim down sights. Basically, you're going to want this around 130 to 100. Anything lower or higher is going to be too fast. But again, this is going to be all up to you and your preferences. And again, I just don't think ALC is really that necessary. Target compensation is your aim assist shift your controller. Pretty much just leave these both as on. If you are on console, you will see a PC or a console option. Just leave it on console. And that is about it, guys. Let me know in the comments if there are any questions about your sensitivity. If you need a little bit more help, I will give you help down there. Hit that like button, check out this video on screen, and I will see you in the next one. Happy gaming, Legends.